Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Truth in Art podcast series. I am your host, Connor Fowler, joined by co-host Antoni.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about the jazz voice. No, actually, we're not. Today's topic of discussion is maybe one that's a bit contentious in today's society.
Lord.
Probably. It's about masculinity and femininity.
Mm.
Say what it means and all that. We're going to start off the episode how we do traditionally, I suppose, and try and understand what it means from each of our own perspectives. So, Antoni, why don't you kick it off? Give us a little bit of a description about what you think masculinity is.
Well, I remember many years ago hearing the idea that masculinity is whatever a man does. That it's inherent in the fact that you're male, or a man or a boy. And therefore, I remember being absolutely blown away by the simplicity and what seemed to me to be the absolute accuracy of that.
Well, I can't speak to that specifically in terms of when you remember it, but...
Well, yeah, obviously.
Well, yeah, I know, but in terms of your dissection of it, I think I agree to some sense. I think masculinity really is what a man or boy does. I don't think there's any certain, let's say, parameters into how one describes masculinity dependent on whether or not the person is a boy or a man, because I think women can be quite masculine. And I think it's, to my understanding at least, it's more of an energy rather than a physical thing that you maintain. There is the physical part of it, because me being a man makes me feel masculine.
But, okay.
No, yeah, I'll say what you were going to say.
Well, I think the point I was trying to make about how, to my mind, how revolutionary and how simple and straightforward the idea that masculinity is the behavior exhibited by men and boys is, because, you know, when you say women can be quite masculine or that men can be quite feminine, the problem with that is that we get to the place we are today, where certain modes of expression are deemed unattractive or unacceptable or whatever, and at the same time they can be put on or acted out as if you're putting a coat on. So, for example, if you say women can be quite masculine, and I understand where that comes from, obviously, but I suppose the point I'm making is I as a woman, have at various times been described as being quite masculine. But when I reflect on that, what I think is that we're attributing the idea of masculinity to ideas of confidence, action orientation, aggression, whatever. Whereas I much rather lean to the idea that if masculinity is the actions, behaviors of men and boys, then that can encompass every human action or behavior, but as it is exhibited by men and boys, which will have its own flavor, different too. So, for example, if a man's compassionate, is he being feminine?
No, I think, well, to a degree, it depends on what you mean by feminine, which is the next point of topic. But before I get into that, just to comment on what you were saying, it's... It is attributed to what men and boys do. Yes, I agree that in the embodiment of where we are now in the physical space. But masculinity is a bit more than that.
I see what you mean.
In the sense of...
Like yin and yang.
Well, exactly. I was going to mention yin and yang. You know, when you're saying action-orientated, that's traditionally what it's always been.
Yes.
Male energy, masculine energy, not men and boys, but masculine energy is positive.
Yes.
It's a penetrative force.
Yes, of course.
You know, it gets things done.
Yes.
While the opposite of that, the feminine energy, is a receiving energy.
Yes.
Right? And that is not strictly true for women in entirety.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
So, yes, when I think of traditional masculinity and what it means, I think of it in those sense and not the fact that it's only attributed to men and boys.
Of course.
Yes, men and boys exhibit masculine energy because they came down here, incarnated, let's say, as a male, as a man in the world. Therefore, he is going to be more of a doer. He is going to be more of an action orientated being, because he has chosen to represent in his physical body the masculine energy. But before I move on, there was a thing Sadhguru said about Shiva being the most masculine man. But why is that? It's not because he actually has more masculine energy. It's because he is in yoga with masculine and feminine energy. So the reason he's allowed, or rather deemed like that, is because he embodies both energies so completely and wholly.
Yes.
Right? And that's what allows him to be the most manliest man. And also, I suppose, on the flip side, his partner, wife, Parvati, to be the most feminine woman. And I think it really comes down to how you embody those energies as a representation of that side.
I suppose in defense of my opening comment, what I was meaning by that, and what was meant, as I believe from the original comment that I heard, is that rather than looking at masculinity and femininity as energies just purely in the world of human beings, what we call masculine is that which men and boys do. And obviously the inverse is true. What we call feminine is what women and girls do. And the reason I think that's actually a very, very helpful starting point is that it totally removes the judgments that apply to how those forms, how those behaviors take shape in the world. So, for example, if masculinity, in terms of how it relates to people, is what men do, then if a man cries when he's sad, if a man dances when he's happy, if he, breaks things when he's angry, that's his masculinity being expressed. If a woman does those same things, because she's a woman, that's her femininity being expressed. There is no judgment on that purely personal level, and that's what I liked about it. In terms of what you're discussing, more of the idea of the yin and the yang and the positive, negative, the polarity of what we embody, of course, every human being has both inside, because the soul is said to be feminine. So, we all have a soul. And so, therefore, we all have that feminine part. The intellect is said to be more masculine. So the idea that every human being has, from an energetic point of view, the positive, negative combination, or the idea that, I suppose I was thinking in the idea of masculinity and femininity, really discussing that more on a level of bodily incarnation. And because I think that's also something that's come up for me since we did the transformation podcast. Because talking about where that kind of inner transformation can take you as a woman, because I think this idea of what it is to be feminine, I'll speak to my own sex, what it is to be feminine is today, of course, an incredibly convoluted idea, but goes back to very, very simple roots. And the very simple roots are in the family, and how those archetypes were displayed, and how your embodiment of the feminine or the masculine was treated.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would definitely agree with you in the sense of the roots of femininity embedded in the family.
Well, I mean the roots of both masculinity and femininity, in the sense that boys growing up, they get their idea of masculinity from the family too.
Yeah, no. I guess the family being the nucleus platform on which both masculinity and femininity are developed. Yeah, absolutely. I think what femininity, or what I understand it to be in, let's say, this physical realm, is, again, the expressions and the actions of women and girls, you know. So what, when you think of certain things like dancing, as you were mentioning earlier, I think traditionally, even though both sexes were always encouraged to partake in dancing, solo dancing, for example, was mostly considered a feminine thing. You know, I think throughout cultures as well, it's the women who will do, for example, ritualistic dancing and stuff like that. Often men as well. I think a lot of African tribes had that.
I'm thinking of the Sufis as well.
Yeah, and the
in terms
spinning
of
and stuff like
ritualistic.
that. But I think that is more to do with harnessing certain energies, such as the masculine and feminine energy, rather than expressing femininity and masculinity as we are trying to understand it now. So, I think I was going to say it's dangerous to express, or to rather analyze masculine and femininity in a very strictly physical sense. The only reason I would maybe think that is because of the certain dogmas that are placed on us today about understanding what masculinity and femininity are. We're talking about the way culture is sort of evolving towards a strict rule set on deeming certain words. You can't be saying that because it's X or Y.
It's basically thought control.
Yeah, thought control. Let's say it that way. But in an esoteric sense, the masculinity and femininity are simply energies that are either doing energies or receiving energies. It's that simple. It's just as simple as you stated earlier about what masculinity and femininity are here, which is simply the expression and the actions of what a man or boy does, and the actions and expressions of what a woman or a girl does. And that it doesn't differ from the spiritual sense either. It's simply two energies. We both, as you were saying before, we both have them internally within us. So there is no such thing really as a fully masculine man. They just don't exist in the sense of.
Shiva was that.
Well, yeah, but I said he was a fully masculine man because his energies of femininity and masculinity were in yoga. But he's not void of feminine energy.
No.
And none of us are. The same way none of us are void of masculine energy. It's simply how we choose to express those energies that makes us seem on the outside more masculine or more feminine. Again, you were saying earlier that some people often described you as a masculine woman. Me, on the other hand, I was never described as a feminine man, but I was described as a man with feminine features. Now that's simply how I look. I have a let's say a sharper jawline, but also soft features on the face that some people would consider feminine. Also, I have long hair. I don't know if that makes a difference, but down with societal norms. Man with long hair. So
it's actually been the norm for men to have long hair for longer periods of time
than it has for the opposite. No, true, absolutely. And I think that's the understanding of that really makes it simple in terms of the problems that we present ourselves, i.e. create ourselves in cultures today specifically. I mostly talk about Western culture because I don't know if it's that prevalent in others. It's quite invasive, but I'm not really sure. I can't talk to that. I can only talk to where I am at the moment. So that's my sort of synopsis, especially of at least feminine energy. It is traditionally been one that receives things, and that's the same with and because those energies are tied to women and girls, and the masculine energy is tied to men and boys, they will of course express what those energies mean, right? So it is going to be obvious that a woman is going to be more receiving, more sympathetic,
Well, we know this is a fact.
But we know that
it's
as a
not
fact.
even...
It's not even that. Yeah, there's no. You don't need to write a paper about this or research or anything.
It's been done.
You go out to the pub and you ask the people, and they'll tell you that as well.
Yes,
you
but
know?
the papers have been written.
But the papers have also been written. Maybe pointlessly, maybe not. Who knows?
Well, we have different points of view.
We have different points of view on that. But yeah, so I think it's, to boil it down, I guess, is that masculinity is simply an expression of masculine energy. And when it comes to the physical nature of it, it is exhibited in men and boys, and the opposite true of women.
Yes.
Do you have any comments on that?
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose this is self-evident, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, in that where women have higher levels of testosterone, they tend to exhibit what are called more masculine traits, and where men have slightly lower levels of testosterone, they can exhibit more feminine traits, even I'm talking physically as much as behaviorally. And the interconnection between the physical and the psychological or the emotional, it's so intertwined. We still live in a world where I notice that the majority of people have not been awakened to the idea and the truth that what your body does, your mind and your emotions will follow. Mm-hmm. It's not just your mind telling your body what to do. An example I can give you is, for example, a really simple example is where people have certain muscles in their face paralyzed, so that they can't frown. This blew me away, actually. So that they can't frown. Those people were significantly less likely to become angry and to have outbursts of frustration, so on, because the muscles didn't form the frown that then led to the emotional reaction. So the fact that what your body does, which speaks again to the importance of things like yoga and meditation and mindfulness or dancing, the muscles contracting triggers the reaction that releases the hormones that triggers the anger.
Absolutely. I mean,
and not just the other way around.
The phrase "smile, it's contagious."
Yes.
It's there's this thing I saw, I think the other day, maybe a couple of weeks ago, the laughing yoga. Mm-hmm. Right? This is kind of beautiful. It's you kind of go for support, and the way it works is that you say your name, you laugh about your name, and maybe you give it a problem.
Why don't you give the world an example?
Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, so it'll be like this. Hello, my name is Connor.
Oh, yeah.
You have to laugh as well.
Yeah, sorry.
And you say something like this as well. And I have financial difficulties. The fact that you're laughing actually creates, a chemistry in your brain that fools you, quote unquote, into thinking that you're happy about a certain thing, right? And that's where the smile is contagious comes from.
Well, I'm feeling that right now. Since you're talking about the smiling, and I realized, of course, it's the same as the frowning. Yep. And just by smiling, I can feel my mood changing and shifting. Yeah. I feel lighter.
So, in relation to the topic at hand, simply being... I was about to say, simply being, like, for example, smiling, or simply being a woman or a man is going to change the way you certainly think about things and how you experience things. But that's on purpose.
Yes, of course.
The design of how we were, how we came to be here.
How we chose to incarnate.
And how do we chose to incarnate as well is absolutely not an accident.
No, of course
None
not.
of it is, and that's I think that's the key takeaway. Is to not forget that, and oftentimes we do. We really have this ability as human beings to not only diverge the course of nature, even though we think, or rather, to diverge the course of nature in the biggest fallacy, thinking that we have the ability to do that.
Correct.
And then thinking, of course we can. We're forgetful often, but. That's the gist of what I think the understanding of, masculinity and femininity to be. And it's not as simple either as what we're saying, because there's a lot of interplay at hand. The interplay with our emotions, which we share as both men and women. There's some things that we don't share. For example, our body is different, but also ones that connect, right? So there's a reason for that as well. So I think there's a lot of, again, as I was saying before, interplay between the way we think as men and women, the way we feel emotions, even though emotions are what's the word I'm looking for? Not unanimous. Similar. Well, not even similar, they're the same.
But are they the same? I mean, that's the question.
Well,
the way a woman
feels
the way a woman might feel grief, I'm not convinced it's the same way that men experience grief. Because how can it be? We're in different vessels.
No, but the key operative there is how they feel. Grief
well,
itself.
I said how they experience.
How they experience grief. The experience part is the operative. Is that the correct term? The operative word there. The actual emotion itself, grief, is shared between both men and women and all humans. How they experience it is completely personal to them.
But what I'm suggesting is, if you, for example, I mean, again, to use a bit of a cliche, but if your physical body is the instrument of your experience on this earth, which it is, and I've chosen to have a female body in this incarnation, and you've chosen a male body, we've chosen different instruments, and those instruments will express that grief or that happiness or whatever differently. Yeah. And I think it's this assumption that we experience it and express it the same way. And I mean it on the most fundamental level, not just because you're an individual and I'm an individual, but, you know, that experience that I've had many times in my life where when I'm with women, expressing myself about very emotional issues is much easier than when I'm with men. It doesn't mean that the comfort I get from the men to whom I express these emotions is not incredibly powerful and important and helpful. But I do notice it is as though I'm speaking different languages, or to people who understand different languages, something like that. Yeah,
I'm not disagreeing with that. In fact, I completely agree. The way you described it as well is very, very well done. Instruments of our experience through our bodies. That's exactly what it is. What I'm saying is that the actual emotions are shared. Grief is not, it's not different because it's experienced by a woman. It is still grief. The only thing that's different is the experience about it. And again, there being a reason for that, just like you said before, the way you experience it with other women and then with men, for example, it could be any emotion, is going to be, let's say, tailored to how those instruments interact with each other. You know, and I mean, we're talking about this now in 2019, but the man-woman thing has been, you know, a point of discussion since the beginning of time. Men always want to understand women, and women always want to try and understand men. I
argue that that's perhaps not always been the case. I think there have been moments in history where perhaps people just took it on face value, and for good and for ill, but the idea was that's how women are and this is how men are. And if you didn't fit into that, the big chunk in the middle of the average mean, then yes, of course, you're going to have some issues. But
I would disagree with that.
Oh, okay.
I think the man-woman debate has been, you know, one that men for sure. I think they, you know, thinking. If they want, they'll write tomes and tomes about how to understand women. You know, what is actually happening, and that is precisely the reason we came down like this. You know, to understand the opposite sex, but most importantly, your partner, right? Because that's what it ultimately is. You know, let's say it's the marriage between masculinity and femininity, pardon me, is to know enlightenment. You know, it's certainly the most tried and true method of achieving that.
Yes.
Because it's been going on forever. And then, most importantly out of all of it, is children. You know, is you bring another soul into being. And that is the ultimate reason why it exists. You know, nobody can deny that. You can see it everywhere in nature, and it's fundamental to our existence. So when it actually comes to really understanding the opposite sex and, you know, being in unison, it is to bring another one of God's children into the earth, you know, and that's fundamental. And that's, to my eyes, incredibly powerful.
I don't know if I agree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That it exists.
See what I mean, guys?
Well, you thought you knew my point of view on this. How
No.
interesting.
It's not, I didn't think I knew your point of view.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that this completely proves my point. But please go on.
That the point of it is to bring another soul into incarnation. Probably, but I think the really beautiful thing is to learn to play together first, and then perhaps that other incarnation will come. But I'm not convinced that it's the reason, because for me the reason is karma. It is the dealing with your past karma. It is the understanding of yourself, and children without a doubt will bring you back to ground zero. You know, if you think you've made a lot of progress spiritually, you have a child, and very, very quickly, within a few years, you'll be brought back to zero. And I suppose that's the point. The point is,
that's what I was alluding at. I suppose it starts in or let's say if we look at it in stages.
Okay.
You go out by yourself. You think, I finally understood the world,
yes.
without even knowing that possibly God's existence in it. You meet someone, and all of a sudden your world gets shattered.
Yes.
Your world gets shattered. And when I mean meet someone, I mean you meet your partner, your loved one, your future spouse, your future karma partner. I don't know however you want to put that, but
karma buddies.
Karma buddies, yeah. And then all of a sudden, boom! Your
Yeah.
world is just ripped out from below your feet, and you have a fundamental crisis of being, because now you have to understand what it means to be, a spiritual being in the world with someone else, and it wholeheartedly depends on how you go about doing it together.
Yes. Yes.
And then when you level up, I suppose, if you want to put it that way,
It's true.
you have
perfect.
a child.
Yeah.
You have a child. I mean, that's just how we've done it. It says it's happened for forever.
Yes.
And it happens with every species on this planet. Now, I'm not sure if lions, for example, have a crisis of being. They just are. So they just be. But we have the cognizant ability to understand and reflect upon our own actions. Therefore, we have, let's say, a closer yet disjointed connection to God in that sense. And so that's I mean, again, this is not the Bible. I'm not trying to teach you the fundamental truths of the universe, because I'm still trying to explore them myself. But at least how my experience has unfolded so far, that certainly has been my understanding of it. And I think, masculinity and femininity are the duality that exists just after you've left God's light, let's say. It's the first barrier. It's not even a barrier, let's say gateway.
Yes.
It's the first gateway out of the cosmos, because that's what everything is based on. Before you have singularity and oneness, you have duality. And I mean, that's, in a weird way, is how I think of original sin as well. But I can't remember how I described it before, so I'm just gonna let you guys ponder that one.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, anything else to add, or? Okay, I think that's it, guys. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Hopefully it wasn't too tumultuous for everyone, and hopefully you got something out of it, man or woman, or anything in between. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye now.
Bye now.